Let's move on to datetime. So first of all, why do we use datetime in Python? Let's suppose, for example, you want to send an invitation link for someone, or you want to set up a meeting after 2 days. So here you can use datetime. And there are plenty of examples where you can use datetime, but for now, let's learn how to use it. So first of all, to work with dates as date objects, we need to import the datetime module. And to do that, we will simply type import and followed by datetime. Now we can use the classes and the functions, and this module is built-in module, and you don't need to download it. It is already downloaded and installed when you downloaded Python. So let's now use one of the functions here. For example, if we want to know the date now, we can simply create an object x and use datetime dot now, and then let me print x. We're going to get, let's run this code, we're going to get this line. So as we can see here, the date contains the year and month and also the day, then followed by the hour, minute and second, and then the microseconds. And the datetime modules has many methods to return information about the date object, and we're going to see some examples about them. So the first thing we saw is to get the date now. Now let's see, how can we create our own date? So instead of saying datetime.datetime.now, we simply create the function x datetime.datetime, and inside the parameter of this function, we will simply add the year, month, and day. So let's suppose we want the year 2020 and the month 11 and then the day 4. So now if I run this code, I'm going to get 2020 11 4, and since I didn't mention the minutes or hours or seconds, I'm going to get zeros. So we can add optional 3 extra arguments here and specify the hour, minutes, and seconds. Now let's move on to the strftime method, and this method takes one parameter and specify the format of the string we are going to return. So let's suppose we have our object here, x, and we want to get the weekday. We can simply use x.strftime, and inside this we are going to place our format so that we can get the weekday, and in this case to get the weekday we'll simply add percentage capital A. Let's run this code and we are going to get the weekday Wednesday. Now let's suppose we want to get the short version of the weekday. We'll simply use the lowercase a, and let's run this code. One more time, we're going to get WED, and this is the shortcut of Wednesday. Now let's move on to the month, and we have also a short version and the full version. The short version is B, lowercase b, November, NOV, and the full version is the capital B, and in this case we're going to get November. Now let's suppose we want to get the number of the day from 0 to 6 and starting with Sunday at 0, and in this case we can use the character or the letter W, and in this case we are going to get 3 since Wednesday is at position number 3, starting at Sunday 0, Monday 1, Tuesday 2, and Wednesday will get the number 3. Now let's move on to the character D, and in this case if we use the D we are going to get the day of the month. So we are going to get 4, since in our code we already wrote that this is the fourth day, starting from 1 till 31. We also have the y and to indicate the year, and in this case we also have two versions. The lowercase version we get 20, year 2020, and in this case the capital version we're going to get 2020. Now let's just make it clearer here. If it is 2018 and we use this, we're going to get 2018, and if we use the lowercase, we're going to get 18. So there are plenty of these functions or these shortcuts, and let's move on to getting the date or the local version of the date. And to do that, we'll simply use the letter X. Let's run this. We're going to get 11 for 18. And if we want to get the local version of the time, we are going to get to write capital X, and we're going to get 0 since we didn't specify the time. And last thing we are going to do is to use the letter C, and in this case we are going to get the local version of date and time together. So this is it for the strf time method, and we have so many shortcuts and so many characters we can use to get different things from this method. And let's move on to the dir, and in this case if we use dir on date time like this, dir date time, and let me run this, we are going to get all the functions that we can use here, such as max year, time, sys, datetime, date, and so on. Now let's move on to getting date from a timestamp, and this timestamp is a number of seconds between a particular date and January 1, 1970. So we can convert this timestamp to date using the from timestamp method. And in this case, let's suppose that I have a specific timestamp and I want to get the difference between this date and January 1, 1970. And in this case, let me write this as timestamp. It will be equal to date dot, and let's use the from timestamp method, and let's suppose I have this number of seconds, and let's print the timestamp and run this, and here we got an error saying that date is not defined because we forgot to import the date from time date. And in this case, if I run this one more time, I am going to get this output, and this date we just imported here is very helpful. We can also create our today's date from this, and we can simply do that by simply creating an object. Let's call it today, and we are going to use this date and the function today. And if I wanna print out our current year, I can use today dot year, and let me run this. I'm going to get 2020. If I want the month and day, we're going to print today dot month and today dot day, and in this case I'm going to get 2020. The month is 10 and the day is 20. Now let's move on to the time class that represents the local time, and in this case if we want to use the time class, we are going to need to import it like the date class, and in this case from datetime we are going to import time. And let's use some of the methods here. So for example, if I want to create a time starting at 0. In this case, I can use the time method. If I go ahead and run this code, I'm going to get all zeros since I did not specify in the parameter here what I want from hours and minutes and seconds. And in this case, I got all zeros. However, if I create another variable object, and in this case, I will name it B, and I will give the time some parameters such as 2 and 30, 44 and 56. Let's print B and run this code one more time. We are going to get hour 2 and minute 44 and lastly seconds 56. We can also add the microsecond. In this case, let me create a new object and hour 1, minute 34 and second 55 and some microseconds, and let's print C, press run. We are going to get our 134 55.005847, and in this case this optional or this last argument is going to be as the microsecond of the second part. Now, as with the date function, here also, once we create the time object, we can easily print its attributes, such as the hour, minute, or second. And in this case, if I have a time, and let's name it BA, and in this case, I have 3, 45, 55, and let me print the hour. I simply type a dot, use the dot operator and type the hour. Let me run this code and I'm going to get 3 print a dot minute and lastly print a dot second. And let me run this one more time. I'm going to get 3, 45, 55, and I can also print the microsecond. And in this case, since I did not specify the microseconds, I'm going to get 0. And finally, our last method is the strp time, and this method creates a datetime object from a given string. So let's suppose we have a string that is a date, and let me just create the string. So let me name it date as string, and in this case I have 5 July 2020, and in this case let me use the strp_time method here. So let me create the date. It will be equal to datetime, and in this case we need to import the datetime and then use datetime dot, use the strp_time method, giving this string date as string as an argument, and we need to add some extra argument here, and the second argument will be the format, and let me write it, then I'll explain it. Day B and finally Y. So what are we doing here? Here this uh, string will constitute the format in which we are going to create our date, and in this case we have the D, the day, B, it is the full month, this is the capital B, we already talked about it, and finally the Y constituting the capital Y is the year, the full year, and in this case if I print this date I am going to get 2027 5, and this is hour, minute, seconds, and they are all zeros since I did not specify them in the date as string here. And this is it basically for the date time. And with that being said, this is the end of this video. Hope it was beneficial. See you in the next one.